to go over some of the boring stuff first. Please turn off your cell phones, put them on silent. There is staff around the building here wearing black shirts, so if you have any questions with respect to parking or restrooms, etc., they're more than happy to help. Also, this is a free speech zone, so we're going to have a good lengthy question and answer period. However, no disruptions in the middle of the speaker's talk, and if there are any disruptions or chaos of any sort, security will remove you from the premises. Thanks for your cooperation. I'm so glad you all agree with that. Okay, now, just as I was looking over all the ticket sales, I noticed there's a lot of people from various places coming here, so how many of our American friends are here? Wonderful, welcome, and welcome to great Canadian weather. And how many of you are out of province? That's wonderful. And when I was going over the list, I don't know if I'm being punked, but somebody bought a ticket from Norway and Switzerland. Is that true? And if so, really? Stand up. UK, wow, well, welcome, welcome, wow, you are very dedicated. Okay, now a little bit about myself. I'm the organizer and moderator of today's event. My name is Sarina Singh. Some of you might know me by my alias, Recovering Social Worker. Why recovering, you ask? Well, that's a bit of a complicated answer, and let me try and explain briefly. Believe it or not, I used to be a feminist. I used to be a social justice warrior. I used to be very left-leaning in my thinking, and I would be the type of person that would have been really pissed off about an event like this today. I'm very pleased to say that I came to my senses, and I now consider myself more of a centrist/leaning liberal thinker. And so you're probably wondering, what happened to cause such a drastic change in me? Well, after spending the last 22 plus years in academia, in psychology, social work, and also in the profession, like I have worked with every community, every group you can imagine, I can say 100% with certainty that for the most part, the social work field is corrupt now. There is a constant policing of language and thought, and if you dare to deviate from what is considered the Marxist, feminist, anti-race activist, transgendered narrative, then you will find yourself quickly demoted, fired, or ostracized by your colleagues. I certainly had people ask me when I did any defense of Western philosophy or literature. I've been told I suffer from internalized colonialism, internalized racism, and that because the British subjugated for India for a couple of hundred years, there's some residual effect on me. Never mind that my dad, I'm a Sikh woman, a woman of color. My dad's the guy in the turban in the front row. Not hard to find, he's the only one. So never in my life could I imagine that I would be called a Nazi, a fascist, and a white apologist. That's been the strangest thing, I must say, in organizing this. Now, I commented on the corruption in social work, but mind you, there's also very, very dedicated people in the field. As I was preparing for this event, the one thing that really struck me was the number of teachers that are emailing me from high school to elementary school. Their emails sound frantic and desperate, and that deeply, deeply concerns me. They basically are telling me, first of all, thank you very much for organizing this. And second, they feel completely alienated within the school board. They are terrified to speak out. They feel they have to teach lessons that even though they don't agree with intellectually and ethically, they feel like they don't have a choice. I think that should concern not just me, but each and every one in this room, and definitely those of you who have children in schools. And the other group that seems really, really terrified, interestingly enough, is nurses. So I never expected that. That was a bit of a surprise. So, as my mentor, Dr. Peterson, always says, the price you pay when you don't speak up is worse than the price you pay when you speak up. So, speak out I did. And yes, there were very serious consequences, from financial to emotional to mental health. But I have no regrets, because now I sleep very well, and I can write, say, and think whatever I feel without worry of Big Brother watching. I really believe that a part of our soul and conscience is eroded when we are silenced. And to see such an amazing turnout, just take a look around, is so encouraging to me. And since the ticket sales have ended, I've received at least 200-300 calls, people guilting me that it's their children's birthday today. There's actually a family outside, I've just been told, who just showed up and said, we want tickets for our kids. So the demand for today's event was enormous, and this was without us putting this on any radio or any print advertisement. It was just based on word of mouth and what we advertised in our own social media platforms. So, I'm ending soon, don't worry. Descartes' maxim, I think, therefore I am, I feel is now replaced with, I feel, therefore I am. A culture of safe spaces, trigger warnings, microaggressions, and therapy dolls are now commonplace in university and colleges. Even places like Yale, which is now infamous for that whole Halloween costume incident. How many of you know about that? Okay. Yeah, that type of hysteria that's taking place at higher academic institutions of learning.
What happened?
And before we move on to our first speaker, I just want to say that I think most of you know this, but in case some of you don't, this event was scheduled to take place on August 22nd. I had requested a room at Ryerson of 500 chairs, and we were just going to sit in front and just have a conversation about free speech. Then, very last minute, they told me, no, you can't have the 500 chair room because there's a law seminar. I said, okay, well, I'm flexible on time, so whenever the seminar's over. And they said, no, the seminar is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., so you can't have the room. So I said, okay, is there any other room? They said, no. So with the help of Dr. Amitay, we got a room of 380 people. So this talk was supposed to have 380 people. And today, thanks to all the protesters and the awareness, we have 1,500 people in here. And why did Ryerson cancel? Because there's a radical fringe group called No Fascists. They threaten chaos, disruptions, and protests at our event. They have been putting swastikas and calling us fascists and Nazis, which I must say, as a woman of color, that is the strangest thing to me, to be called a Nazi. Because if I was alive in Nazism in that period, I'm sure it wouldn't go too well. So the university canceled 2 minutes before the event, and people were emailing me saying they had booked hotels, flights, car reservations, and I felt awful, but I'm so glad that we could reorganize, and I'm so glad that Dr. Peterson, Dr. SAAD, and Dr. Amitay have encouraged me all along and been very supportive, because, you know what, as a private citizen, for me to be able to reach out and get such reputable academics and scholars to take out their time and come here really, really means a lot, and I'm very thankful. I want to end by saying, without freedom of speech, our civilization descends into fascism and totalitarianism. We need not look any further than Turkey, North Korea, many of the Arab countries. Today is Remembrance Day, and millions have perished for this freedom, and I worry that so many people are taking these freedoms for granted. And I am, and I believe our panelists as well, are of the Milton Mills school of thought, which is that all ideas, no matter how offensive and insulting, should be spoken about in the public forum, because it is only when ideas are spoken in the public forum that bad ideas will be countered by good ideas, and their bad positions will become self-evident. The answer is not to bury those ideas, because they go underground, they brew, and they fester, and then we have chaos. Okay, thank you, and I'm going to now introduce our first speaker. Dr. Gad Saad really doesn't need an introduction, but he is the professor of marketing and holder of the Concordia University Research Chair in Evolutionary Behavioral Sciences and Darwinian Consumption. That's a long title. An advisory fellow at the Center for Inquiry. Dr. Saad is a strong supporter of free speech and recently testified on Parliament Hill in Ottawa on the adverse effects of Bill C-16. He has written over 75 scientific publications covering a wide range of disciplines, including in marketing, consumer behavior, psychology, economics, evolutionary theory, and medicine. His work has been presented at 170 leading academic conferences, research centers, and universities around the world. A sought-after speaker both nationally and internationally, he's also appeared on the popular Joe Rogan and Dave Rubin shows. His books include The Consuming Instinct, What Juicy Burgers, Ferraris, Pornography, and Gift-Giving Reveal About Human Nature. I love that title. The Evolutionary Basis of Consumption, and Evolutionary Psychologist in the Business Science. His YouTube show, The SAAD TRUTH, is listened to by millions, and his sense of humor is greatly appreciated by his admirers. I must say, I need a daily dose of Dr. Saad. I am always reading his Twitter account and looking at what new jokes he's put out up there about those who would deny him and everyone else free speech. So having said that, he is here from Montreal, so can we please give a great Toronto welcome to Dr. Saad.
So when the weather changes, I get this cough. So if you've shaken my hand, don't worry, you don't have to fumigate. It's not viral. It's not contagious. It's a remnant of my asthma. So the title of my talk today is "Death of the Free Exchange of Ideas by 1,000 Cuts." And the point that I'd like to make is that while, of course, there's all sorts of threats to freedom of speech on university campuses, the threats are coming at us from many, many different sources. And I'll actually enumerate several of these examples. Let's first begin with some pretty bad news from Canadian universities. Why is it not moving to the left? Oh, it is moving. Okay, well, I have to move here too. Okay. So the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms 2017, I usually quote the 2015 one, but the most recent one came out. This is a report that scores 60 Canadian universities on one of 4 metrics. University policies, how free they are, university practices, student union policies, and student union practices. And so there are 60 universities by 4 metrics, so there are 240 grades that you could assign to the universities. And out of these 240 grades, you'd love to hear that all 240 received A's. Here are the actual numbers. There were 6 A's out of 240 possible grades. If I said nothing else today, that should give you chills. 38 F's. Since Ryerson University is the one that decided to not hold the earlier event, I thought that I would grant them the courtesy of sharing their grades. It's a very, very impressive C, F, F, and F. Here is the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, or for short, FIRE. I highly recommend you check out their work. The president of that organization has been on my show. His name is Greg Lukianoff. He is a First Amendment lawyer. And they actually filed lawsuits against universities if the universities violate the First Amendment rights of staff or students or professors. They had a survey that came out just this past month. You can check it out. I've included for you here the actual link. But let me just list you a few troublesome findings. Most students, 56%, support disinviting some guest speakers. So more than half of the polled students think that it is perfectly okay to disinvite someone if you disagree with his or her views, if they are dangerous, if they are espousing controversial ideas. Perhaps not surprisingly, given the, quote, liberal bias on universities, Democratic students are substantially more likely to support such deplatforming initiatives. 58% of college students think it's important to be part of a campus community where they are not exposed to intolerant or offensive ideas. Now, of course, anything that I don't agree with, I could somehow construe it as offensive and problematic, right? So who defines what is problematic or offensive? And a majority of students, more than half, support or report self-censoring in the classroom. Actually, that's probably the most insidious downstream effect of the problems that we're seeing. It's when people say, I've got two choices, I could either speak or I could self-censor. Well, the latter seems like a better option, let me keep my mouth shut. This is a fantastic, I'm trying to keep up with the different, is it going back? I need to go more back. Yeah. This is an article written by Edward Schlosser, who is a liberal professor, admittedly liberal professor. And the title of his article is, I'm a liberal professor and my liberal students terrify me. Let me just read you a few quotes. I have intentionally adjusted my teaching materials as the political winds have shifted. I also make sure all my remotely offensive or challenging opinions, such as this article, are expressed either anonymously or pseudo-anonymously. He's not writing from Yemen, he's not writing from Saudi Arabia or from North Korea, he's writing from North America. Most of my colleagues who still have jobs have done the same. Hurting a student's feelings, even in the course of instruction, that is absolutely appropriate and respectful can now get a teacher into serious trouble. In this type of environment, boat rocking isn't just dangerous, it's suicidal. And so teachers limit their lessons to things they know won't upset anybody. Again, this is terrifying to see. This is coming from a progressive, liberal professor. And so the ethos is feelings trump facts. We condemn freedom of speech that hurts other people's feelings. Now, in my life, I have faced, I don't know why I keep sorry for the delays. Okay. I have faced two great wars. Is it right? Yeah. First, many of you who know of my personal history, I come from Lebanon. I lived there till I was 11. We're Lebanese Jews. We had to escape Lebanon under immediate threats of execution. And so I came to Canada, and the things that I saw during those times in Lebanon, you wouldn't believe it if you saw it in a violent movie. And I thought that war had left me back in the 70s. But there's a second war that I have now been dealing with. And that's the Great War on Truth. So there are two great wars that I've faced, the Lebanese Civil War and the war that I face every day in my engagement as a professor and as a public intellectual. And so the way you attack truth, there are many ways, and that's going to be part of my forthcoming book. Well, if you can, now I'm speaking as if you are an enemy of truth, the most direct way you attack truth is you kill those who are espousing the truth. You kill the intellectuals. This is why totalitarian movements, the first thing they do is they don't go after the guys with the big muscles. They go after the guys with the big brains. They're the ones who stand in the way of you being able to spread your ideology. So if possible, inshallah, we will kill the intellectuals. If that's not possible, like in North America, then there are other ways by which we can shut down truth. And of course, the work that all of the panelists here are doing speaks to this ongoing, relentless battle. So, how do you stifle truth seekers and truth tellers? You do so through various nonviolent means. You enact hate speech laws, like M103 we have in Canada right now. Political correctness, thought policing, language policing, and I'll give examples of this that have happened to me in the recent past. You promulgate anti-science and anti-science gibberish. like POMO, postmodernism, radical feminism, social constructivism, cultural relativism. These are all attacks on truth. You create forbidden knowledge in science, things that you, as a scientist, you should not touch. Do not study race differences. Don't you dare touch sex differences. And most people say, well, I have two choices. Either I can ignore these edicts, or I can toe the line. Most people toe the line. You build intellectual echo chambers, you deplatform speakers, you have Orwellian social media companies that control much of the information that we consume, and I'll give some examples that I've recently faced myself. And then you abide by the following equations. Social justice is more important than the truth. Feelings are more important than the truth. Tolerance is more important than the truth. And ideology is more important than the truth. And once you've hopefully set up this ecosystem, then you've gone a long way towards creating a climate of fear where most people are going to self-censor. Here are some folks who did decide to speak out. I won't mention all of them, but most of them have actually been on my show. Alice Drager, Michael Rechtenwald, Brett Weinstein, Laura Kipnis, Christina Huff Summers, Janice Fiamengo, Yoram Adamson, and James Damore, who was my most recent guest. Each of them have had the temerity to tackle some sacred cow of the quasi-religion of progressivism. Even though most of them would have come into this battle thinking that they are progressives, that they hold the immaculate cards of progressivism, yet they dared challenge some progressive tenet, and then they paid the price for it. And in some cases, they paid a very, very heavy price. The first one on the left, Rebecca Tuvell, is a woman who dared argue that it's not, if some of the tenets of transgenderism are as they are, then why can't we extend some of these ideas to transracialism, which is something that I had somewhat facetiously mentioned in my Canadian Senate hearings, and then you should see how the folks that she would have thought are in her camp, how they came after her. Now, if you think that identity politics can protect you if you have the right metrics, the two other women in this photo, in this slide, are trans women. Blair White and Theron Mayer, who was she also testified in the same session as I did in the Canadian Senate, and you would think, well, they're trans women, maybe they can be granted a bit more leeway if they criticize some transgender activism issues. No. Once you violate the central tenets of progressivism, your identity no longer protects you. And to point to that, let me show you the next slide. Your skin color and your religion. Look at these white male Nazis. By the way, some of you might know that of all of the stories that could be told here, none is greater than when the people who tried to shut us down accused me, a guy from Lebanon who's Jewish, who escaped Islamic execution in Lebanon, of being an anti-Semitic, white supremacist Nazi. So Salim Mansour is a professor in Western University who went in front of the Canadian Parliament. He is a practicing Muslim, and he went in front of the Parliament to argue about some of the dangers of the immigration patterns that we have. Now, he's a practicing Muslim, and he's saying this. He's saying that we need to have a more tempered entry of people coming from countries who don't share our values. I'll just very briefly mention them. Tariq Fatah, Rahil Raza, most of you know, Ayan Hirsi Ali, Asra Nomani, Irshad Manji, who's not only I hate the term, but a person of color and a Muslim woman, but she's also a lesbian. Now, you'd think she scores very highly in victimology poker. When she comes out against some of the progressive religion, then all of those points evaporate, and then she becomes a white male Nazi. Sarah Haider, who is one of the co-founders of ex-Muslims of North America, and then the biggest white male bigot in the history of the world, Thomas Sowell. Many of you might know him. He's actually the granddaddy of the social justice warriors, fighters. He's the guy who was fighting these guys when probably no one on this panel was almost born, or maybe 1 or 2 years old. So he's really someone that we can all look to as a model for having started fighting many of these regressive ideas within the university ecosystem more than 40, 50 years ago. I've tried, by the way, to get him on my show. It hasn't worked yet, but I still hold out hope that I might be able to bring him. Now, before I put the next slide, if you thought, what would be a historical figure who is so untouchable by social justice warriors and progressives, who would that person be? Just say a name. Martin Luther King. I heard that several times. Martin Luther King is just a white male Nazi bigot. This is at the University of Oregon. His I have a dream speech. Let me repeat it. His I have a dream speech was debated as potentially being not sufficiently inclusive, and maybe it had to be taken down because, gender expression. Let me give you some examples from my own life. This is me looking all dapper with the bow tie in front of the Canadian Senate. The point of my testimony was to simply argue that, of course, transgender people exist. Of course, they are entitled to all the rights that all of us should have. Of course, they should not be discriminated against and live their lives free and with dignity. But that there were some downstream consequences in the manner in which the bill was written. And the example that I gave was, well, I teach evolutionary psychology, evolutionary consumption, and I go over the fundamental tenets of evolutionary psychology and evolutionary biology. Well, every single word that I would say in my courses after I say, hello class, my name is Dr. Tsao, I'll be your professor, would be considered as transphobic systemic violence according to this idiotic bill. At least if you read it in one particular way. Well, Harvard University said that if you promulgate fixed binaries and biological essentialism, fixed binaries is the idea that there is a thing called male and female. Biological essentialism is to refer to biological principles in explaining human behavior. If you promulgate such ideas, you are engaging in transphobic systemic violence. So all my courses, all my writings, everything I do then would be construed as transphobic systemic violence. And the luminary Einstein, Senator Surjewala, decided that that testimony amounted to me being a promulgator of pro-genocide. And he has since become known as Senator Genocide. Apparently the rumor is, I don't know if it happened or not, he wanted to retract some of those comments and apologize for it. I'm not sure if the official records show that or not. In any case, continuing with this story, just 2 days ago, I had a Psychology Today blog, a column which I haven't been publishing much of, but I decided to take my transcript of the Canadian Senate testimony, and literally verbatim take my full transcript and publish it as an article in Psychology Today with a few updates. And to my dismay, I was surprised. Why is it not appearing on the home page? And so I wrote to the editor saying, hey, why is my article not up? And so he wrote back to me that it consisted of a lot of mere opinions and that he used the following 2 sentences from my testimony as sort of offensive opinions. So let me quote them for you. This is the tyranny of the minority. 99% of the population should acquiesce to having a default feature of their personhood erased because a few individuals might be inconvenienced by it. What I was talking about there was the idea that Canada is trying to move to a gender-neutral reality where many official government documents no longer have a biological marker. And my point was that I do wish to be recognized as male. And I do wish my son and daughter to be recognized as male and female. And the fact that some folks identify as non-binary, which is a very small percentage of the population, doesn't imply that we all lose our personhood to acquiesce and celebrate your personhood. And then
I continue by saying the slippery slope of totalitarian lunacy awaits us. Because of these two sentences that are so dangerous and offensive, he decided to yank my article. When I challenged him, he said, well, we don't publish opinions in psychology today. To which I replied, so if I were to look at the hysterical articles about the psychological state of Donald Trump on your website, did we assume that you're going to retract all those? I've yet to hear back from you. Continuing with some attacks on freedom of... Now here people, some folks will write to me and say, well, when you complain about YouTube demonetizing your videos, this has nothing to do with freedom of speech issues in their company. I know that. The idea is there an ecosystem that's chilling, that's making folks think twice before they share something? A lot of us spend a lot of time outside our otherwise busy lives providing you with content, and we don't take what? Not because of the money that we're losing. I make very little money off ad revenues, but the principle of them being able to purge all this content is problematic. And so not surprising, any of my YouTube clips that deal with the transgender issue, including my actual Canadian Senate testimony, and then a gentleman did a sketch animation of my testimony, and then I did a facetious, sarcastic article where I said, address me as follows or face the legal consequences, where I wrote that my preferred title from now on is Your Most Excellent and Magnificent Lord of the Universe, Emperor of all things, Professor Dr. Tsao. Now that's my title. If you want my preferred gender pronoun, it's the one there, which is difficult to, it's SLKLW and so on. Now, they thought that that was too dangerous of a satirical piece, and so they yanked it. That's not good. That's not how free societies behave. Here are some other clips that were demonetized. I chose ones that were specific to today's theme of freedom of speech. Just yesterday, I spent several hours going over the 540 clips that I've produced so far on the SAAD Truth. And out of the 540, more than 25% have now been demonetized. There is nothing that I say that is demeaning. I don't incite violence against anybody. There is nothing that would cause any person who is not naturally lobotomized to actually take off these, demonetize these, but here we go. So let me just mention a few. My rather popular lecture at the University of Ottawa, how political correctness limits the free exchange of ideas on campus, gone, unmonetized. Political correctness versus absolute free speech, that's a dangerous one, gone. The slow eradication of freedom of speech in Canada, gone. Thought police and political correctness in modern academia, gone. When I say gone, they're still up, but they're unmonetized. They're too dangerous. Death of the West by 1,000 cuts, gone. And finally, honoring folks on Memorial Day, gone. Here I am at Gulag 13. Is it not there yet? Okay, here we go. About a month ago, I was engaging a person on Twitter, as I do often with many people. I try to do less of it because you can quickly go mad trying to engage all sorts of people that come at you. But once in a while, someone catches my attention and I respond. This person was being a bit of an arrogant idiot. And so, in responding to him, I referred to him as a retarded degenerate. I added the little spicy Jewish term, schmuck. Now you can't be against schmuck, that would make you an anti-Semite. So because I referred to him as that, and then he went off and complained to Twitter, I was banned from Twitter for 12 hours. So an exchange between two grown adults where we are sparring with one another, as happens endless number of times on Twitter, caused this person with an incredibly fragile state to feel that it is worthwhile for him to contact Twitter and ban me. But that's not where he stopped. He then started tagging my university. This guy, by the way, I found out later, lives in Australia, right? So he felt very, very unsafe from me, from the very close distance of 6,000 miles. He then tried to argue that my use of the term degenerate was homophobic and racist. I have no idea what his sexual orientation is, nor what his race was, because it's a semi-sort of anonymous account. When that didn't work, he then contacted my university and filed a complaint with them. Now, but this is the really chilling part. I received an email from my university telling me that a complaint had been filed against me. And so I thought, well, it clearly must be in the service of my being a professor at the university, and yet I don't remember having any incidents that would trigger such a thing. And in speaking to the HR person in question, who otherwise is a lovely person who regrettably was just doing her job in the Orwellian world that we live in, she said, no, it's that interaction you had with the person on Twitter. To which I answered, let me make sure that I get the story straight. When I mentioned that story, probably today's event. So you're telling me that you're contacting me after hours because you construe it as reasonable for my university to be checking how I engage as a private citizen with other people in Australia? So if I were to hear that you are having a bad exchange at the pharmacy when you're buying aspirin with someone, I will report you to the university and they should follow you? I never heard back from them. So then the point to take from this is that the natural reflex of that particular administrator within an ecosystem called the university felt sufficiently emboldened to actually follow up on the quote complaint. I was also banned for, I think, a day. There was a person who was sending me all sorts of Jew-hating stuff. When I actually put up a post where I linked to her profile, she found a complaint against me. So her sending me endless Jew-hating stuff was perfectly fine. My pointing to the person who's sending me Jew-hating stuff, you've crossed the line. So what are some... Sorry. Do you know why it's not moving? Anybody? Okay, here we go. 2 more slides and I'm done. This is actually a slide that I read at the University of Virginia recently when I gave a talk, and it's worth repeating. Freedom of speech is everything. All the forces leading us to the abyss of infinite darkness must be dismantled. No more language police, no more thought police, no more echo chambers that shun intellectual diversity, no more identity politics. Instead, promote the dignity of the individual rather than supporting oppression Olympics and victimology poker. No more coddling of the culture of offense and the ethos of perpetual victimhood, as per the guy who thought that he should spend 1 month pursuing me because he was hurt at my calling him schmuck. Is that a functioning adult? Is that a natural reaction of people? Do you know how many insults I receive in a given day? About every possible thing. Going from how I look, to my religion, to anything you want, every single day. But this person could not handle schmuck, and he thought that I should be fired from my job for calling him schmuck. Do not cede a single inch, I'll even make it smaller, a nanometer, to any ideology that is antithetical to our secular, modern, and liberal. And when I say liberal, I don't mean faux liberal. I mean true classical liberal values. All ideas, beliefs, and ideologies are open to criticism, debate, mocking, ridicule, and other forms of scrutiny, short of direct incitement to violence. Eradicate hate speech laws. 1 more slide. This is from Ronald Reagan. I think it's particularly apropos for our event today. Let me just read you their quote. "Freedom is never more than 1 generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day, we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States or in Canada, where men
and I don't mean just men. I mean men, women, or non-binary or gender fluid people who are free. So get engaged. And as I promised I would say, I told this already to Serena. Serena didn't have a platform. She wasn't a known professor. She's not a known media personality. She's just a person who cared enough to create all of this. So if she can do it, any of us can. So for the endless number of people who write to me, I'm very touched and honored for all of you who write to me, in the thousands, who say, well, what can I do to get engaged? Just remember the two words, Sarina Singh. And so I'll end you with my now infamous battle cry, march on, soldiers of reason. Thank you.
There's a bit of a height difference, Dr. Tsao. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Tsao, for your kind words.